How to build sauna walls. In this video, I'll show you how to build insulated sauna walls step by step. More specifically, we'll talk about all the different layers in the sauna wall. I'm Anton, a Finnish-born sauna expert. I've helped thousands of people and businesses design saunas that actually work as they should. Now, just to be clear, when we talk about insulated sauna walls, we're not talking about one single layer of wood slapped together like an old whiskey barrel. Modern insulated saunas, whether they're outdoors, in your backyard, or built inside your house, are made up of several layers working together. From the outside in, you have the exterior paneling or siding to keep the weather out. Then you have the wooden studs. Then you move on to the insulation that keeps the heat in where you want it to be. Then on top of that insulation, you put a foil vapor barrier to stop any moisture from sticking through the wall. Then there's a little air gap that lets the interior wood breathe. And finally, you have the interior paneling that you actually see and touch when you're in the sauna. Now, not everyone will need to do every single layer. For an outdoor sauna, you'll usually want to do the full package, including the siding, insulation, vapor barrier, the works, so it stands out to the elements and keeps the heat in well. For an indoor sauna, insulation and proper vapor barrier are important so humidity doesn't escape into the rest of your house and cause mold or rot down the line. Just so you get a better idea on what it really looks like, I have a little kind of picture here to kind of illustrate the whole different layers of the sauna wall. So here's the outside and here's the inside on the right. So starting from the outside here is exterior paneling. Then you'll move on to the studs, and those studs you can see there clearly. There's three of them, there and there, and then between those studs is the insulation, for in this case would be mineral wool. And then after the mineral wool, you're gonna have here is the vapor barrier, and then after vapor barrier is the furring strips to create an air gap, and that air gap is between the vapor barrier and the interior cladding. So next, logically, is the interior cladding right there. Nice and simple. Let's get into the walls. Layers in insulated sauna walls. Let's take a closer look at each layer and what it does. Think of this like the anatomy of a sauna wall. Every part has its job, and when they work together, they get a structure that stays warm, dry, and comfortable. Let's start off with the exterior paneling. If you're building an outdoor sauna, think of the outside walls just like they're in the house. You've got the siding on the outside, cedar, spruce, pine, or any weather-rated material that can handle the rain and sun. Behind that, usually you want to have a wind or weather barrier, just like in a house wall. Its job's simple. Keep wind and moisture out of the wall while still letting the structure breathe and dry. Then everything is nailed or screwed into a standard framing. If your sauna is indoors or attached to your house, you don't need to worry about the exterior paneling. It's the interior layers like insulation and vapor barrier that matter in this case. So, don't overthink it. Outside wall equals siding plus barrier plus studs. Just like you'd build any small building, the real sauna magic starts once we get inside that wall. Secondly, framing. Inside the exterior, you usually have standard framing. Usually it's like 2x4 or 2x6 studs with around 16 inches spacing between them. Before you insulate, you can consider adding blocking where the benches and heater brackets will land so you're not hunting for studs through the paneling later. What blocking means is horizontal wooden beams between the studs so you have a strong mounting point for anything heavier that is mounted onto the sauna like a sauna heater or the benches. Here's a little picture to give you an idea on what it really looks like when you're going to be blocking between the studs. So basically this right here is the block between the studs, or in this case it's the furring strips because we have the PIR boards back there. So these are the furring strips that are on the studs themselves, so it's strong. And then this, like I circled already, that's going to be where you're going to put like anything heavier like the sauna heater, or then for example any benches that might be off the ground, no support beams on the ground. And you might be thinking here that, oh wait, where's the air gap then if you put this there? So basically how it works is here behind this wood right here is an air gap still. So this block here isn't as thick as the furring strips are in this case, so it's a little bit thinner, so air still goes behind here, the wood block, so there's no problem with that. For example, if you're doing a smaller sauna, those usually have the benches mounted to the walls to keep it clean underneath. But you can also do everything freestanding in your sauna, like the heater on the floor, and then the benches supported also from the ground. It all just really depends on your sauna plan, so just be sure to keep that in mind. And also, I want to mention one more thing, that it's good to plan any penetrations now, like vents, slides, or conduit, so you don't Swiss cheese your vapor barrier later on with any unnecessary holes. Thirdly, insulation. When it comes to insulating a sauna walls, there's really two main approaches. I recommend keeping things simple with either a foil-faced PIR board or then mineral wool. Both of them work great, but in slightly different ways, so the right choice depends on how you want to build your wall. Let's go through them one by one and see which one fits your preference. Foil-faced PIR boards. These boards are really common in Finland and have been gaining popularity elsewhere too. PIR is a rigid foam insulation board. When you buy it foil-faced, that aluminium foil surface becomes a part of your sauna's vapor barrier. Since that board also acts as a vapor barrier, you won't need to worry about adding any other layers on top later on. PIR board also has a much better insulation value per inch than mineral wool, so you can get a lot more heat retention in less space. That means thinner walls, which is great if you're trying to keep the sauna really compact. Installing these is pretty simple. The boards are cut to size, then placed on top of that framing, and then sealed carefully at the seams with aluminium tape. If you do this right, you've already got a shiny continuous vapor barrier without any extra steps. There are a couple of things to keep in mind with PIR boards though. The seams have to be perfect. Any gaps or cracks will let steam sneak right behind the boards and cause trouble later on. So use, for example, polyurethane foam and aluminium tape on top of the seams to make the layer completely airtight. Here's a bit of an example on what it really looks like when you want to seal the seams properly. So basically, you see here are the boards for the PIR. And all of these are basically sealed with this tape here, you see. That's the aluminium tape on the seams. And you see that they're really put on there, so there's no gaps, it's like airtight completely. And that's something you want to do everywhere around. So you see it goes all the way here, there, everywhere is the tape. You don't want to skip on that because that's something that you'll definitely regret later on. But yeah, that's give you a little bit of an idea. But then also, if the gap is a little bit bigger, you can use like a polyurethane foam, for example, to put in the gap. And then on top of that, you'll put the aluminium foil or the tape. So it's definitely sealed properly. Another thing to remember is to plan all possible penetrations really carefully. Any place you cut into the boards for wiring, lights, or vents need to be sealed back up. In other words, seal it up like you do with the winter jackets, for example. Tight everywhere so no heat or steam can sneak through. When done right, foil-faced PIR boards give you a super efficient and clean wall system that holds heat very well. Mineral wool. The other classic option is mineral wool. This is the fibrous insulation that comes in bats and is installed between the studs, just like insulating a house wall, for example. Mineral wool doesn't sag or lose its properties when exposed to high heat of a sauna. It's non-combustible and it tolerates humidity a lot better than fiberglass. The mineral wool fits between the studs and only needs friction to stay in place, so no need for any adhesives. Availability is also one thing with mineral wool. For example, rock wool is widely available and often cheaper than the PIR boards, especially in America. But with mineral wool, you need to always add that separate foil vapor barrier on the inside because insulation itself doesn't stop any of the moisture getting out. The foil vapor barrier goes directly on top of the studs, covering the mineral wool, and then you'll also add furring strips and paneling on top of that. There are also a few things to remember with mineral wool. The bats need to completely fill the cavity with no gaps or compression. Even small cracks become thermal bridges where heat can escape. Also, since mineral wool has a lower insulation value per inch compared to PIR, you'll often need to go for 2x6 framing to get similar performance with PIR boards that would provide in a thinner profile. So, which one's for you? Both options give you a great sauna, but here's a quick way to think about it. Go with the foil-faced PIR boards if you want a thin, efficient wall and like the idea of combining the insulation and vapor barrier in one step. Go with mineral wool if you prefer a traditional, forgiving insulation that's non-combustible and often more affordable. Just remember, you'll be adding a separate foil vapor barrier later on. Fourth, the vapor barrier. On the interior side of the insulation, you need to install aluminium foil vapor barrier. This is a sauna standard because the steam wants to sneak right through the wall and condense in the cold layers. Start from the ground up, overlap the seams generously around 6 inches and seal every seam and staple with aluminium foil tape. Not duct tape. The duct tape melts, cries, and falls off. If you don't seal these seams, these points will become points of entry for humidity to escape the cabin into the rest of your structures. If you plan on using foil-faced PIR boards, you'll still want to treat those seams like a vapor barrier. Foam and tape the joints and seal penetrations. The idea is a continuous shiny envelope. Remember to pre-plan the bench or heater blocking and also the electrical so you don't have to puncture the foil later on. If you do end up making a hole, seal it like a security deposit depends on it, because it kind of does. Fifth, the air gap. Over the vapor barrier, he's installed vertical furring strips to create a vented air gap behind the interior paneling. This gap lets the wood heat more evenly, protect the foil, and give any sneaky moisture a path back into the room and dry out without getting stuck on the wood. You want to space those furring strips apart around 14 to 24 inches, depending of course where your studs are. The air gap itself should be around ½ inch to 1 inch so the wall breathes. The strips are only placed on the part of the wall where the interior cladding is coming, so not all the way to the roof or all the way to the floor. The amount that it goes to the floor depends on how high the floor tiles you brought up on the wall. You want the interior cladding to go over those tiles around 2 to 4 inches, so usually like a half a tile. So what that really looks like in real life is that here you have the furring strips. These are basically, this is like the floor. This is the floor here. Just kind of a picture, it's a bit cropped. So this is the furring strip goes to the floor. It doesn't go all the way, you see. So this is the tile that goes up the wall a little bit from the floor. So it creates a little bit like a bucket on the floor so any water doesn't escape. So basically here you can see the furring strip does go a little bit over that tile. It's like half a tile in this case, so 2 to 4 inches. And just because you want to cover this seam, and you can see otherwise this, because it's going to be kind of exposed, because this cladding you see here, this will become another piece here. So it'll be another wood cladding here. And obviously if it go just cover, it would just cover this furring strip, so I wouldn't see it. So last cladding would be here, covering it. So it'd be kind of like, if you put your hand up there, you can feel the foil, but you don't want to see it. But who's gonna go down the floor, lie down, and try to feel for the foil? No one. But anyway, that's how it works. Just to make it a little bit more clear. One of the reasons why saunas usually have horizontal interior cladding is because the furring strips are placed vertically. Why are they placed vertically? Because that way any moisture that gathers up on those foil vapor barrier drips down back into the sauna. If you place those furring strips horizontally, then any moisture will get stuck between the strips, creating problems in the long run. If you do want to run your interior cladding vertically, that's not a problem at all. You'll just need to do the furring strips a little bit differently than with the horizontal bars. For that vertical paneling, you'll still want to start with the vertical furring strips to keep the air gaps just like we went through before. But then you add a second layer of horizontal strips on top of those. That way the air gap is still there, but you still have a solid wood running across the wall so you can nail the vertical bars into. So basically how that looks like is that you have here, there's just the normal vertical furring strips. So they're placed all around the room, you see, blah, blah, bum, 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 bum. So if you have these vertical furring strips and you want to do vertical paneling also, you'll have to put the horizontal strip, the furring strip, on top of the vertical ones. So how that looks like basically will be like this. You'll put it right on top of these vertical furring strips. So when it's on top, you'll still have this air gap between here going behind it. So what it basically means that the wall will come out a little bit more than it would usually, but that's the price you have to pay if you want to go for that vertical paneling on the inside of the sauna. Yeah, that's how you do it. It's pretty simple, but you might not think of this before. That's how you keep all the benefits of that air gap while still getting the vertical look for your paneling. Sixth, interior paneling. Let's start with different wood. The most common sauna woods are knot-free spruce, aspen, or alder. All of these stay comfortable against the skin, smell pleasant, and don't produce any resin under heat. Thermally modified versions of these woods are also great choices since they're more stable, durable, and handle the sauna's humidity and heat swings even better. Cedar is also really popular in America, though in Finland, spruce, aspen, and alder are still the more traditional choice. One thing to look out for is if the wood has any knots in it. The difference is that if it does, then it's usually a bit cheaper since it can seep and also get hot when you're in the sauna. See this on the walls, you aren't usually touching it all the time so that you could burn yourself, but it's still one thing to consider. The common board size in Finland is usually around 0.6 inches thick and around 4 inches wide. You'll find many different tongue and groove profiles. Some create a very clean and flat wall, while others leave a thin shadow line between the boards for a more textured look. The choice here is mostly about aesthetics. So just keep in mind that the wood moves over time with humidity, so small gaps might appear naturally, and choosing a profile with a shadow line can also help hide this movement, but it doesn't really matter. The paneling is nailed or screwed into the furring strips, not directly into the foil. Hidden fasteners like clips or nails through the tongue give the cleanest look, but visible fasteners work fine too if they're pre-drilled and set neatly. What the hidden fasteners look like in real life, here's an example on that. You can see here's the wood paneling we have on the inside, interior cladding. So here you can see the nail or nails put into the furring strips themselves. So you don't have any visible fasteners, screws, nails, whatever. So this will be hidden completely when you slide another wood piece here on top into the tongue and groove board. So you won't see anything. That's how you make it look really clean. You don't need to do this necessarily. You can always, put really like small nails, or I don't know what they're called exactly, but you can put here. That's really common too, like really small nails in the wood. So you can kind of see the holes for the wood, but the nails are really deep inside of it. So you can't touch it or burn yourself. It doesn't look ugly. You can barely see it, but it's there. So those are basically the two different ways you can do it. Just to give you an example. I do want to mention that you don't want to have any exposed screws or nails that you could burn yourself. The important thing is that the paneling is secured to the furring strips, not pressed against the vapor barrier. This way, the ventilation gap we talked about earlier stays intact and the paneling can warm evenly. Installing all the paneling in the sauna is usually started with the ceiling, then you go on the walls and work towards the sauna door. That way, your cuts and seams are less visible and the panel looks a lot more consistent from the user's perspective. One more thing to remember is to leave a small gap where the walls and the ceiling meet. Leaving a small gap here on the top lets air circulate from behind the wall paneling into the ceiling gap. This hidden path is what lets any stray moisture escape back into the sauna instead of being trapped behind the wood. The gap can be around 0.15 inches. As for finishing touches, you generally don't want to treat the paneling. You can apply a light sauna wax or paraffin oil if you really want extra protection, but the main thing is to avoid any heavy finishes or paints since they trap heat and moisture and can cause odors. 7. Other materials in the sauna. Even though wood is the main star of the sauna, sometimes you'll see other materials like tiles, stone, or windows used inside. These can look beautiful and add character, but they behave very differently from wood in the sauna conditions and need to be thought through carefully. Let's start with tiles or stone. Tile or stone can make a great accent wall, especially near or behind the heater. They soak up heat and then radiate it back into the room, which can help balance the temperature. But they're also cold and hard surfaces compared to wood. That means if you sit against them or put them in the wrong place, they'll feel uncomfortable to touch. And they also make the sauna longer to heat up since they store much more energy before releasing it. Use them as accents or protective surfaces, but not where people are going to lean or sit on. Windows and glass. Adding a window in your sauna is a good idea. It brings in natural light and it gives the room a sense of openness. But glass is always a cold surface compared to wood. What that basically means is more heat loss, possible condensation, and a cooler feel if you sit right next to it. If you include windows, keep them smaller so they don't interfere with the comfort or waste too much energy. Always use sauna-ready insulated glass units and make sure the frame is always sealed well. Otherwise, moisture can sneak in and cause long-term problems. You can do a full glass wall, for example, if you wanted. They are really popular nowadays and look really modern. But if you decide to do that, you'll want to make sure that you take that into account when calculating the space's cubic footage and get a more powerful heater accordingly. It definitely won't be a problem. Wooden walls provide a warmth you can feel, not only in how they look, but also in how they smell and how safe they're to lean on. That's why wood is the base material in every sauna. Other materials like stone, tile, or glass can absolutely be used, but they should be only accents to enhance the atmosphere, not take over. Think of them like spices in a recipe. Just the right amount of spice makes a sauna feel special, but too much, you'll lose what makes it comfortable and functional in the first place. So, that's how you build a sauna wall, step by step. From the exterior siding all the way to the final paneling inside. And even with the extra details like stone and glass. And remember, robust sauna walls aren't just about stacking wood. If it was that easy, then IKEA would be already selling flat pack saunas with an Allen wrench included. Luckily, this version will last a lot longer. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.